Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Fruits of Our Labors 13, the virtual edition. I am your teacher here, well, facilitator more than anything. My name is Duchess Riley Buchanan, for those of you that don't know who I am. I am one of the moderators here, one of the co-autocrats for Fruits of Our Labors, which is an annual event that we host, the Canton of Bernard hosts. And when I was speaking with our Baron about this, when before COVID-19, he mentioned that he didn't think there was nearly enough roundtables going on in the arts and sciences community, and that he thought we should help change that. So that is how this came about. So if I can just get everybody to kind of go in kind of order, and or at least the order that shows up on my screen, and introduce yourself and what kingdom you're from, that would be great. So I have Bernard C. here.
Yeah, hello, I'm Matthias Lindenheim von Schaffhausen, the co-moderator for this session. I'm just sort of interested in early period clothing, just sort of, you know, getting the feel of it.
I am Shauna Holmes from Callantyre.
Who's next, Matthias?
On my participant list, I have Gary Walker, but...
Great.
So, I am Baron Duncan Gow MacLeod. I'm Eldemir, specifically Skraeling, and just some interest in how people were not naked in the early days.
All right, thank you. Next on my list, participants, I have Odette.
Hi, Mistress Odette de Saint-Remy here from Eldemir, who got interested in early period clothing when hot flashes hit and realized that it's way more comfortable.
My list is changing order, which is not helpful. Now I have Emmer.
Hi, I'm Emma Nakaiden. I am also from Eldemir, specifically Bernard Nog, who is hosting FOOL. So I've been doing early period clothing my entire time in the SCA, and it's been a passion for me to try to convince and turn people to the way of the tunic that is not just a paper bag.
Good one, Emmer.
Thank you.
Next up, Amelia.
I'm Amelia. I am from Eldemir, specifically the Shire of Trinidad Nova. Sorry, mouthful of breakfast. I am obviously not an expert in early period, and I would like to learn more about it. So I'm mostly here to listen.
All right, next up I think is, I apologize for the potential pronunciation, but Eadwin?
It's Aiden.
Aiden, okay, excellent.
Yeah. So I'm Aiden Ingen Knetha from Lonely Tower in Callantyre, and I know a lot about later period, but not so much earlier period, and I want to know about all the periods.
Great, thank you. Next up we have, oh, this list keeps changing around, which is making it really fun. Laura?
Do your best, my friend.
Hi, I'm Laura Gagne is my real name. My SCA name is Rosalind Ducotans. My husband and I joined about 6 months ago, and I sew, so I have to make all the garb. So I'd like to see what there is and find out some more so that we can actually look like we belong in this group.
All right, and I think we just had join Michelle Earle.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a real newbie when it comes to SCA, so I'd like to learn about new garb and how to do it and all that kind of stuff. My STA name is Anne.
All right, thank you. And also just joining was John Sproul.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Right.
And I think that's everybody for now.
My tech issues appear to have quieted down. And so let's get to this. Matthias, if you would like to please put the poll up. I just thought this would be a nice little fun thing to do. I was kind of curious on me is if I were to go back in time, what is the one thing, the one piece of artifact that I would like to bring back with me, sort of solve whatever issue you have, whatever kerfuffle you've experienced, whatever proves your theory, whatever you have. So you should see a poll up. If you can just pick whatever it is that that makes you happy, and we'll go from there. And then Matthias, whenever everybody's returned it, if you can share the results for me, please, and then we'll take a look from there.
What's the cat's name?
This is Reno, the Herald cat, because he always shows up in the Herald meetings. He will be here a lot today.
Cats are perfectly allowed at my class.
That's good. I don't think I could stop him, so.
All right, look at that. So we got a bunch of Saxons in the crowd. Woo, woo for Saxons. Those of you that picked none of the above, what would you take? If you picked none of the above, tell me what you take.
I don't know enough to.
So who picked none of the above?
I did.
Anybody hear me?
Because I would love to have just a single, well, ideally several, but a single complete outfit from the 8th or 9th century in Wales, because there are none extant.
So what are you looking for? I got 8th or 9th century Wales, and that was it.
Just a single set of clothing, just a single extant set. If I could bring one of those forward, that would be amazing. I don't even care what gender, just clothing.
Anything. Okay, great. Who else picked none of the above?
I did, and it's because I don't know enough of each of the options to choose.
All right, fair enough.
A good thing I picked an apron dress, but actually I should have done that.
What was that? So what was that, Michelle?
I should have done that because I'm like she was that I don't know enough of the options. I've done a little bit of research, but not a whole lot.
All right, fair enough. All right. Good. Well, and I think we all suffer from that, and that is lack of evidence. We deal with small sections of fabric. We deal with tiny bits of tunics. We deal with, that kind of issue. And it's not like, you can look at a lovely period, painting and be able to, count stitches, because you can do that in late period. We can't. So. How do people get around that?
There is still some pictorial evidence that you can find, but it's never going to give you the detail that portraiture does. I've used everything from Irish carved crosses, runestones, old manuscripts with illuminations like the Book of Kells, Book of Durrow, things like that. But you have to really look with an eye to the historiography of it, because you're really interpreting what you're seeing rather than having it handed to you.
Grave finds and understanding the decomposition of the body. So knowing that the brooches that are shown are not actually lower down on the body, but they're up higher.
Oh, like that one woman.
Yes, exactly.
I think even fragmentary finds that are from grave sites, or like the Viking Norse Hedeby Harbor finds, which are ships caulking and random bits of fabric that was used to stuff things. We can, part of the fun of the early period is being able to like dig into those and try to play pattern fabric Tetris in your head or on paper.
I like that. Sorry guys, I'm going to turn off the video just to see if we can improve my quality at all here. Emily's saying that Orla uses brooches and jewelry relief. Yeah, it's another good source of places to start to look.
It's also perfectly fine for newer people to.
What else have? Go ahead.
It's also really fine for new people to not have to start from scratch. Like, there are enough of us in the SCA who have been doing research and who put up tutorials or are really happy to talk about tunics and things for a really long time. So the newer people shouldn't be overwhelmed by needing to research just from like the tiny scraps of evidence that we've got, because other people have already poured over it.
Yeah, there's certainly enough of a learning process to go through coming in to the SCA, even if you already know how to sew. It's just they did things differently because they were working in a very different time. They didn't have a sewing machine
On
and a
its 6th century Kent. That is a most excellent question, Catherine. There's a lot of people that would love to know what was going on in 6th century Kent. If you anybody seen the Cloth and Clothing in Early Anglo-Saxon England by Penelope Walton Rogers?
I've not heard of that one.
I think I've looked at it at your house. That's about the most.
Yeah. So I got a question. Got a question about how do people find patterns? Do they make them? I know personally that there a number of good reputable sites with basic patterns, but to make something that fits your body is going to be, just like everything else, a tailoring experiment and trial and error.
A lot of SCA costumers use what's called rectangular construction, which is basically most of the pattern pieces that go into a tunic or an apron dress or an overcoat are squares, rectangles, and triangles. So the real key is taking accurate measurements of your body, adding in an inch or two if you need extra space or want to be able to like bend your arm all the way, and then plugging those numbers in where they need to be. There are definitely a couple of websites out there that have some good advice. There's even a couple that let you type your measurements in and generate a basic pattern for you.
There is also the fundamental truth that sales of cheap muslin or even drop cloths I've heard being used to, okay, I want to make this. I've got this nice pile of nice, beautiful blue wool. I'm going to make it out of muslin first, make sure it fits. So you stitch all that together, you pull it on, and you figure out where it's tight, where it's too loose, etc. And then you cut the nice wool or linen or what have you.
Yeah, so I'm in total agreement there, Gary. I would totally start with a mock-up of some sort out of, inexpensive, or even I've done, relatively, something I want to wear, not just muslin, to make my first mock-up. And then once you get the measurements, you can make them over and over and over all the same size and tweak. That one fit, not so great, want to add a little bit here, want to add a little bit there.
Gee, that fit 5 years ago, but I guess it must have shrunk, hung in the closet.
So we've had a request here for sites and resources, which I think is a great idea. If those of us that have a little bit more experience want to send me something privately, their favorite sites, their favorite whatever, I'll collate something and get it up on the handout site.
Ooh, cool. That'd be great. Because, yeah, I had thought about working on something like I knit. And I had thought about working on something, kind of in squares with my own little patterns. But, I would want it to be kind of like true to form, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So
what, those of us are a little experienced, what are the basic fundamentals of tunic construction?
Oh.
Measure your body. Measure yourself. Get a friend to measure you. Get a friend to measure you.
Measure twice, cut once.
There's a great one.
Measure like a bunch more times than that.
And then measure again, yes.
Yeah, and then
basically,
actually take those measurements, and when you've got your pattern, you actually have to follow those on the fabric too, which is a problem that I often have because I'm over enthusiastic and just start cutting. But I mean, you want, if a tunic can be made to fit any body, and there's ways that you can do little things that will give you more tailoring Putting in or leaving out an underarm gusset, like right here, this tunic, I left out the gusset underneath the arm because I had barely enough fabric to make a tunic, and this is really nice light linen. So I just made the armhole a little deeper and slightly curved this, but generally I like having a little underarm gusset, but my gussets are like maybe 4 inches square. I've seen tunic monstrosities with like almost a foot by a foot, which makes so the gusset sort of starts here and ends somewhere by the waist. And that's too much. You don't need that much there. And likewise, where you set your gore in.
Especially if you're a little small and busted.
Yes. Well, I can talk for too long. Please shut me up if I'm going too much, because this is like my thing. The nice thing about gussets that go under the arm is they're a square piece of fabric, but that means that following the vertical and horizontal lines of the fabric go into that square. Which means this way, the diagonals are what's called the bias of the fabric. And even in a fabric like linen, anything that's got the bias is a little stretchy. And so the great thing about having an underarm gusset where you set it in on, like you set it into the tunic on right angles, means that this angle here has the bias, so you get a bit of extra stretch for moving up and down. And it means for those of us who are more chesty, we have the other way of the bias is actually going right around, and it sits right around where our bust line is. So I've actually, like, because I've had children and then I've been nursing and then I've stopped that and whatnot, my waist and my bust line has gone all over the place in the past decade. And being able to change out an underarm gusset to give a bit of extra room as I gain weight or whatnot has been amazing. But it really is, it can be a difference of an inch or less, just that little square for how it fits around the chest. And that's important for men too. It's especially important if you're making garb for someone who's going to fence or fight.
Or arch.
Yep. If you like to move your arms.
So does everybody, I just want to make sure that we're not talking over people's head. I wanted to make sure we're not talking over people's head. Does everybody understand what the basic gusset and gore construction that we're talking about is?
No.
Yes.
Does anybody wagging their head going, I have no, oh good. So that's a yes, you know, or yes, you want more clarification. Laura? I just want to make sure that we're not talking over, you know, like people that don't have any idea.
We did have
okay, yes, you know. Okay, no. Any idea whatsoever. Okay.
Yeah, I did hear no.
What was that?
Well. I heard somebody say no at some point. So
Yeah.
Somebody had a no? They didn't understand? Sorry.
Here's a gusset on my tunic.
Okay, so whoever's speaking.
Pardon?
You're currently got video off, so showing us your tunic is not going to help.
How do I?
Yeah, we can see him.
His video's on.
His video was on.
Yeah. So, like, it's a square piece of fabric that fits on the underarm. And a gore would be a triangular piece of fabric that you put in, say, at the side to make it bell out a lot. Is that a good way of explaining gusset and gore?
Yeah.
Can I do a share screen thing? I pulled up a basic drawing. Is that okay?
Okay.
Let's see. Oh. I don't know. Can people see that?
Yeah, it will.
It's black. Oh, there it
Give it a
goes.
minute,
Yeah.
Amber. It's just it's telling me that you have started screen sharing. There we go.
Okay. Okay. I haven't done this before. So if you look, oh, it's apparently my internet connection is bad. Sorry.
But I can see it.
Yeah. So what you see is in the center. This is sort of an exploded view. You would fold in the middle and sew side seams together to make this into a tunic itself. But
yeah,
you
along
see
that
there's
dotted
a
line, it's
rectangular-
what would be the shoulders. That dotted line
Yeah,
there is
and so
is the shoulders.
So the body part is in the center. It's a big rectangle.
Uh-huh.
The sleeves are kind of like trapezoids, but effectively they can be done as rectangles. The way that they taper out or they taper in as they get farther away just means that that's narrowing towards the wrist. The gussets are the little tiny squares that are down in the armpit area.
We're in a bad spot.
And gores are the triangle bits that sort of flare out the skirt. And you can have gores only on the sides or up in that left-hand corner. You can also put
Debbie?
gores into the
You want our
center.
coffee stuff too? You want our coffee grounds too? Sure. Okay.
We got somebody. I'm getting background noise from somebody here.
Yeah. If you're not, if you have background stuff, you might want to mute your microphone.
Do you want me to stop the screen share?
I had a question about the screen share.
Yeah.
When I look at the very large rectangular piece,
yes,
that is the main body of it, I see a slit along the center back and all the way down the center front. Now, would there have been a slit to make the garment easier for the legs to move, or that slit goes up pretty high?
That slit is on the screen share is to accommodate that gusset,
Oh, okay.
a triangular piece that's to the left. So that
Okay.
gives a fuller skirt.
Yeah. Now, would
I
the
have
slit at
done
the-
tunics without that center gusset.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of earlier, I haven't been able to find hard evidence for having the gores that go into the very back or the very front until into the 1000s. So if you're doing anything earlier than that, you don't have to think about that. You don't have to add the slit.
No, and in fact, most of the time,
up, though,
Now,
is a way that you can make a coat. If you were to look at the bottom half of this example on the screen, it goes all the way up to the neckline. You can make a split front overgarment. And there are examples of that in a couple of different cultures. Because it makes sense.
Thank you, Amber.
Also, and now this is in my limited experience, but if you can make your gores, the insert piece, a little longer, like 2 inches or so longer than the slit, when you sew it in, you tend to lose a little bit. And if you've got a little extra that goes past the hem of the main body, then you can cut it off. If you cut it to what you think is the right dimension and you end up short, then you have to cut off from the main
yeah,
body.
at least if at least if the slit is short and you have too much, you can always like tease it out and lengthen it a little bit. Way better than it being too long and you not having enough gusset to fill it. It really, for me, depends on what status of garment that I'm trying to portray. You know, that large gusset in the center, front and center back, takes a lot of extra fabric. And so for me, for when I do low status stuff, I don't bother with the center gusset. When I did my coronation tunic, yeah, they totally had center gussets, you know, more material, more wealthy garments.
Now, one question I have is, how much evidence is there for the nice strips of trim that go around, like the neck holes and ends of sleeves and hemming the bottom of the garment?
So for like trimming on the bottom of the garment,
bottom or around the neck hole, ends
like
of
trim around the
sleeve.
bottom of the garment, and at the ends
Yeah.
of sleeves and stuff like that. Well, we certainly see something like that looks sort of like that on the Bayeux Tapestry, which is often what is cited for that to do, but archaeological evidence, not very much. Anybody want to speak earlier than Hastings?
Well, there's now I can't remember. Arnegund and Batilda, the two Frankish queens that we have burials for, did they have strips on their outer coats, or is it all embroidery? I'm not remembering very well. There's tons of embroidery on those finds, though. And there's a lot of linear designs on things like some of the Irish depictions of clothing. And again, we don't know how much that's artistic fancy or not, but there are definitely, like, especially in the bottom hems, there's like sort of a band with pattern marks on some of the carved stones. So it's one of those hard to say exactly, but it's just as probable as anything else.
I think when you start to look at that, I think, again, you need to start to look at what status of tunic are you portraying, right? If you want to, you know, extra fabric means extra fabric. It means embroidery, means time. That all means money. So decorations that could be reused would certainly be more desirable to, again, save money. I think if you're doing a very high class...
The scraps of silk found in some of the Irish grave finds, so that really backs up what you're saying. You know, you have just a little bit of fancy stuff, so you use it, probably reuse it.
Yeah. And so I would think that probably, you know, one thing I know that we take for granted in a modern world is how relatively easy it is to obtain fabric. When you have to shear the sheep or wet the linen and spin it and dye it and weave it, you start to really appreciate how much effort goes into that, and how cutting so that you waste nothing and reusing what you can and patching what you can starts to become important. So, you know, we take for granted, oh, I can buy this beautiful, you know, piece of silk and put it on here, no problem. Medievally, that would have been very difficult to do. Narrow wares like tablet weaving and stuff like that take less thread than a full piece of cloth, and certainly less thread than piece of cloth plus embroidery.
And not to mention, no problem if you want it in a 60-inch width.
What was that?
No problem getting the fabric if you want it in a 60-inch width.
Warp-weighted
Because
looms have been shown to do widths up to the 60-inch. There are
really
lots of evidence for that. Yes.
Oh, is there?
Wide wares.
Because I was doing looking at patterns for the Dungiven find, and they'd encouraged me to make the cloak out of several parts, because I guess Irish weaving technology may not have been up to it at that time.
No, actually,
I don't agree with that.
So my thought on that is this. Anybody that's ever woven knows that dressing the loom is the tough part. And if I don't have to dress it to 60 inches, by God, I don't want to dress it to 60 inches. I'll do 30 inches and do it twice as long.
Okay.
Plus, you're going to go narrower if you want to use that for some sort of shaping and draping.
Yeah.
Because they're going to drape differently.
Well, the Dungiven find was not the deluxe clothing of the period. Eventually, this thing got deposited in a bog. But I'm interested when you say that they would weave wider like that. So I learned something today. Woo!
Consider all the Roman, the Roman tunicae, the Roman peplum type dresses, or the Greek chiton type dresses. They're wide. They're really wide, and that's
that's
turned even earlier than the medieval period.
Yeah,
so,
and when you start to look at the evidence, they went from that to peploses, and from peploses to apron dresses. At least that's what it seems to me.
And you can weave in borders. You can weave in designs. It's harder for us to find yardage that includes woven in stuff. I mean, that's part of what's really nice about this is that it's got little tiny bands of thread woven into it. And it's really rare to find a piece of linen that's got this sort of stuff in it. But in period, they would have had the ability to jazz it up a little bit or change out the color of the threads every now and then. So,
yeah, there's also the possibility of doing other weaves too. Most of what we end up seeing commercially is going to be tabby weave, but they could do other stuff. And if you're interested in weaving technology, then I particularly like North European textiles until AD 1000.
And yeah,
if anybody wants to remind me what the author is on that book, that would be great.
If I hire somebody or barter with somebody to make me a chunk of fabric, then I can say, okay, use a band of green, and then a couple threads of red, and then green, and carry on that kind of pattern. So I get what I
Dad,
want.
how much would it cost to do that? How many hours would that take?
Well, it depends. How fine do you want? I mean, we have early textiles up to like 60 threads per centimeter.
Wow.
And I hate to tell you that I'm not weaving that.
I just blame you.
But if I come to you and I tell you I want so many yards of this fabric and put in like broad green stripes and red stripes and such, at a regular, like a suitable threads per inch count that you're already normally doing, that's a guaranteed sale and such. It's not something you're going to.
Yeah, but except
run.
nobody wants to pay the kind of money that it would take, because you can buy perfectly 100%,
I made a dress.
you know, authentic hand-woven fabric.
I made a dress out of hand-spun fabric. I wove it myself. I used a spinning wheel and a modern loom. It still took me over 7 months. And I didn't process the fleeces. I sent them out to get processed.
Yeah. But
How long did it take, Odette?
If you
Over
earn your
7 months.
If you earn your keep as a weaver in period, you're going to weave on spec as some.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Or whatnot. And
period weavers were not guild members. They were household members. So they weren't weaving necessarily to spec to sell things. They were very often weaving for their extended family unit.
Yeah.
Well,
and
we do know they were selling fabric. They weren't all doing it.
For that, but
cleaning.
Yeah. But if you earn your money weaving, and you've got the wool and whatnot, and you make a say 20 meters of 20 yards of cloth, and you're going to sell that at the market when you're done, or I come to you and say, I've got the money, I would like this fabric. I think you're going to appreciate having a guaranteed sale.
You can, Gary, you can totally buy that. There are weavers in Europe that will totally do that. And I think they're running somewhere around 110 to 150 pounds.
Yeah.
A yard.
Oh.
And in period the same thing would be done.
Or you'd ask your aunt or your wife or whoever was the weaver within your family unit to make it for you.
Yeah.
Or the weaver might be making up something for a family member and choose to do that. I mean, it's not going to be that much more work to put a colored thread on the end of the setup than a plain thread. You know, I'm going to ask a stupid question because I'm not a weaver, but would they be able to put a pattern like that through the weft?
The pattern on the weft can be adjusted for color, but also on the way you lift the threads and lower which ones you do at a time helps bring up the pattern and help make the threads too. So yes, you can put in a stripe along the weft or the horizontal, but you can also lift your shafts up in different ways in order to weave in a pattern.
So there would be several ways to actually weave in a pattern.
Oh, definitely.
Now, in terms of archaeological finds, would the pigment in them survive if that had been done?
Well, they certainly have done spectral analysis on a large, on a few of the fabrics, and yeah, some of the dye stuff survive.
I know we've got from the Iron Age, we've got people weaving checks and plaids, and you can still see that in the extant finds. It's not the same color now after it's been through a bog, but there definitely are ways, either whether we can see it visually or whether we do spectroanalysis or chemical analysis to detect dye stuffs. There's lots of ways that fabric historians are able to analyze for things like color.
But they don't analyze a lot for color because you have to destroy the textiles to do so. So very often they just don't mention any dye at all, whether there is or not, simply because they don't want to, you know, burn up or destroy the textiles in some way in order to get that information.
Which kind of makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah. I have, if you guys are interested in period weaving in the early age, I have put a couple of files up on the site in the chat section. One is a copy of the front of the book, which is North European textiles, and then the second one should be the front page, which is the author's sort of depiction of the weaves that she has found in period, and it's a pretty exhaustive study of textiles, but only up to about 1,000. And then the last picture you're going to see there is just if you haven't seen it and you are interested in early, like really early, for me that's really early stuff, then the Cloth and Clothing by Penelope Walton Rogers, so you know what to take a look for. So that's just some resources there if you're interested that you can take a look at.
The other thing that I've noticed is, particularly if you're in places that are more Renaissance fair or fantasy oriented, you'll be able to buy trims that have metallic threads in them, and you know, all sorts of sort of gaudy medieval-esque themes. And I did buy one once that I'd like, but I've never used it because I looked at it and I said, hey, the only person that would ever be able to afford this would be like the king. And even at that, I kind of doubted that there would be something that woven of that ilk. It just struck me as too much. So I guess newbie mistake. I kind of think that the tablet weaving is probably a much better order.
Brocade, so you're asking about tablet
No, I was just observing
weaving
that
with metallics in it?
Yeah, it was well, I can probably dig it up.
Is it? Yeah, I think
but-
one of the finds, Burka maybe,
Yeah.
you guys, or Hedeby has brocaded metallic tablet weave. Anybody remember which one it is?
There are a couple of them, aren't there?
I think so, yeah.
Well, here. Look, I know exactly where it's going to be. Why don't I just run out of the room for a second and see what I can dig up?
And again, super, super, super expensive. Ask the metalworker how hard it is to get, you know, thread that metallic thread that fine, wire that fine, and it'll be able to do it. But yeah, that's a super, super expensive display of wealth.
Definitely. I did some research a little while back, and yeah, there was actually workers, like guild workers, that just worked in that gold thread. So yeah, it would be very expensive.
I just wish to relate a story, and those of you in Eldamere will appreciate this story. We had when the Kingdom of Eldamere was just beginning, we had a king that was killed in a car accident, and he was buried in a three-piece suit with a Viking sword, covered, and people went and they threw pennies on top of his coffin so that the archaeologists could definitively date it, and buried him, and I am positive in a few 200 years we're going to have 21st century reenactors running around in three-piece suits with Viking swords, because god damn it, they have a grave find. One grave find.
Here is
So
the.
what I take from that story is one grave find does not a period make. And
No.
if we think about ourselves in that terms, right? People are buried in three-piece suits all the time. Do we wander around in three-piece suits? No.
Yeah.
No.
I want to get
Right?
buried.
They're buried. We're buried in our best.
Yeah, I want to get buried in my steampunks.
Right. So, anyways, that's just my story about grave finds and using them with caution.
Grain of salt.
So here is the metallic
Oh.
trim that I got at
Very nice.
Artisan d'Azur. If you haven't been there in Montreal, I quite like the store. It has a pile of medieval and fantasy type stuff. It's a LARP store. But I've been wary of using it because, you know, this is kind of deluxe goods. I got 5 meters of it for $31. I don't know if it's historically accurate for anything, but it was a purchase. What can I say? The other thing that I got was this was a cheapie find.
And you know what? To start with, there's nothing is wrong with cheapie finds. To start with,
yeah,
The cheapie actually looks
nothing
like
is wrong with that.
Yay!
that one actually looks like it might be able to be woven with tablet weaving. Anyway, if it's got a simple repeating pattern,
Very simple zigzag repeat.
yeah, like simple zigzags are totally a thing.
Okay.
As far as the other one, maybe it's a period, but does it make you feel good if you were wearing some garb in it? Is another question that we need to ask ourselves, because sometimes the SCA really is the you know, we're a really weird club where people from Rome interact with people from the Elizabethan era on a regular basis, and while some of us find it really, really fun to try to replicate as close as possible the historical garments, that doesn't have to be everyone's thing. You know,
that's a good way of saying.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like,
yeah.
You can be as authentic as you choose to be within the SCA.
It's better to have clothes that will make you happy than clothes that you hate wearing, and that includes especially what we do in our hobby.
That being said, inside the zipper.
Yeah. It's sort of like I'm kind of new to the SCA, and I haven't visited the Renaissance Fair thing yet. I'm getting the feeling that the Renaissance Fair is very much looser about historical accuracy, and I find the historical accuracy interesting. It's a way of learning about the past. So I'm not too wild about an outfit with a zipper in it either.
Yeah. If I can interject, your second cheapie trim that you have there is actually in pattern reasonably close. Yeah, that one is actually in pattern reasonably close to the Snartamo 3 trim find. Except that one was executed entirely in wool with no metallic.
Okay.
So yeah, I would use that if you, if you think it's really horrible, you should mail it to me for proper disposal, and that would be okay too.
Very good.
Okay. If people don't mind, like a really specific nerdy question, and I'm going to kind of preface it.
Love specific nerdy questions.
Because
nerdy questions here.
Okay, so this is my really specific nerdy question, and I'm going to kind of preface it quite a bit so that people who aren't as far in the weeds as I am can like follow where we're going. Okay, so I've been I've been for the last like year and a half working on the project of sewing my way through Dress in Anglo-Saxon England by Galo and Crocker. And I've also done some other research, and I have the Walton Rogers book that's specifically on early Anglo-Saxon cloth and clothing. Okay, so so the like 5th, 6th century for most of the Anglo-Saxon area in England, you've basically got a tunic, and then you have like a peplos pinned over it that's pinned at the shoulder, possibly clasps on the wrist, holding it shut, maybe not. Okay. Then you've got, and the shoulder proploses are, there's like a brooch on each shoulder around the collarbone. It's pretty obvious that they've got to be holding up something that's a peplos. Okay.
So you're looking at
Then
the Penelope Walton
you get over to Kent, where
Rogers standard
the style
four-brooch costume.
of the jewelry is.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm looking. I've got Owen Crocker. I've got Walton Rogers, and I've done other research kind of just on the internet. Those are the 2 books I'm mostly operating out of. Okay. So Kent is weird because
Kent is weird.
Yes, Kent is weird. Okay. And the way in which Kent is weird is from the grave finds. We don't have the wrist clasps, which, okay, whatever. And you also don't have the 2 shoulder brooches that are clearly, yeah. And you don't have the 2 shoulder brooches that like, it's got to be holding up a peplos, because there's almost nothing else that you would be wearing like that. Then in Kent, what you have is between 2 and 5 brooches of varying size that start out basically at the top of the chest and kind of go down to the waist or a little bit past the waist, that are on the basically kind of the center of the body. Now, there are obviously several ways of interpreting this. Now, the people in Kent seem to be a slightly different ethnic group who in general have more connections to like basically what's going on immediately across the English Channel.
Yeah.
So the tendency has been to interpret this as basically being, you have a tunic, and then you have basically a Frankish style coat like you see in the Argund and Bethild grave finds, where you have brooches fastening the coat up the front. On the other hand, it is like based on, and we're talking about grave finds where most of what we've got is metal, so very little textile. And it would also be possible, and this is kind of following the sort of trajectory that Anglo-Saxon clothing takes in the future, where you're going from where the peplos goes away and you just have tunics, which are kind of clasped at the throat. So the idea is, well, could this be just a tunic that's open to the waist, and you have several brooches fastening it together. And I'm just curious, like, what do people think? Like, we're not going to know
I
unless
call
we
cloth and
have
clothing in Anglo-Saxon England, except for Kent. It's like Penelope Washington Rogers says, blah, 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 except for Kent, where they do this other weird thing.
Oops.
And I mean, it's, totally valid to just kind of go, Kent, it's weird. But if you're me and you've gone crazy and you're, interested in making at least like plausible outfit. And I will say my goal for all of my garb is I want something that if an archaeologist dug it up, they wouldn't have to revise any of their assumptions about what people were wearing in this time and place. So, obviously, you're never going to know if you're perfect, but I want it to be like in line with what we know as much as we can. So, best guess, you're actually making the outfit. What do people think is most likely to be going on here?
I think there's a degree that we all kind of have to accept that we're never really going to know if we're right or not. Especially the earlier we go, the less finds that we've got. Because we're working with really limited resources. So we just have to do our best. Really, I mean, you kind of have to decide for yourself.
Now, that being said, Sophie Walton Rogers is still writing. She's still an archaeologist.
There's some.
You can contact her.
And that's something that we forget, I think, is that we're allowed to write museums to ask about some of their artifacts. We're allowed to write the authors of papers that we find.
And they would probably be incredibly complimented that somebody's paying attention to their work.
Yeah.
But we might always hit a wall where we don't know if we're right or not. And that's where these kind of things in the SCA are really helpful, because like I found a couple of people through the society who also have been struggling with something obscure like Irish costuming in the heroic age, or sort of the dark age, early medieval period. And it was really validating to find out that other people from entirely different parts of the world, a different country, had been using the same sources that I had and coming to the same kinds of conclusions. It kind of reinforces that you're not completely out there or totally crazy or working on some false assumptions. If you've got other people who've come to the same place. And it also can be really fascinating to find out what they've got that you haven't. So, which is why I think roundtables like this, or show and tells, where we actually can like pick up and look at each other's constructions and garb choice, fabric choices and things. Because collaborating is another way to be a little stronger.
Further to your point, I did some research on Viking music. And the reality is that there's like one or two melodies written down, and that's it. There's hardly anything left. So we've got a pile of what their musical instruments were, some ideas of some tunings from those musical instruments, possibilities of how those instruments are used in other cultures. But any reconstruction of Viking Age music is highly conjectural. And I like the use that one of you made of the idea of something plausible as a reconstruction. Now, in Garb, you've got an awful lot more physical evidence, you've got iconographic evidence, but in the music, it's sparse. And yet you get, there are now Viking Age bands like Highland that pump out a fairly plausible version of what Viking Age music may have been. I don't know if they then put an electric guitar in the background or not, but you know, they're playing for people of the 21st century, not of the 10th century.
You should join the Bardic moot later this afternoon. We can talk about music reconstructions and things like that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was going to drop in on the 16th century group, 16th century instrumental music. But I'll try and look up the Bardic group and see what goes there. But I love the idea of saying I'm making something that would be plausible, that is as good as you can.
And don't be afraid, everybody, to change your opinion of what is most plausible when you do more research, when they get more finds, when somebody writes a paper and it reinterprets what we see. Go back to the original finds, make your own interpretations about what you're seeing.
Within the last,
you know, there's
3 years,
certainly a joy in.
There's a new archaeological site that's being explored that's 7th century dated, and there's like, I mean, it's going to sound really morbid, but there's like 130 bodies in this site, the entire ring fort. It's got a silversmith's shop, and
you know, and 100.
I cannot wait to get the data because I'm hoping that it will, you know, I don't care if it proves me wrong. It's going to be hard data. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we all have to be willing to do that. We all have to be willing to change our opinions and you know, just take a look at stuff. I mean, there is a certain joy certainly in looking at a manuscript or a picture and being able to recreate it from a pattern, a period pattern directly. And there's also a certain joy in trying to puzzle solve how this works. You know, in doing the experimental archaeology into figuring out how things work.
It's also
wearing the clothes, using the artifacts.
Every so often they'll have a find. I have a passing interest in Viking lyres, Anglo-Saxon lyres, and I think it was in 2002 they found the Trossingen lyre in a grave, and it is magnificently decorated. It's probably one of the best surviving lyres from that time period. And I remember when I first saw it, I thought, oh, somebody's dolled up a lyre with imaginative incising. It was all period. It was all real. And, you know, just this fabulous thing that survived. Fun. Sorry. Random mumblings.
So speaking of interesting finds, anybody else know of any other interesting finds? Anybody else find any interesting finds? Anybody else know about any interesting finds? I believe that the dig in Kent that Penelope Walton Rogers was dealing with, she is they're doing the other side of the railway tracks. So that one has actually already been dig up. Emma, what's yours?
Well, like I said, I'm waiting for things to start being published from this one new Irish site, and then everything gets to be explored and revised.
Where's the dig?
It is. It's around Dublin, so it's really neat. It's just going to be really fascinating. I have to look it up again. I have to look into it more. But I know that these things take time. Academics take their time. I've been really fascinated in the past with the two Frankish queens, because the Frankish clothing is really interesting, and it's complete outfits of women. I mean, they're incredibly high status, but it's interesting to see, like, they're wearing pants, they've got coats on, their tunics are embroidered and decorated in interesting ways. You know, it's one that you can kind of go back to again and again. And when you're looking at something that's as early as 5th century,
Wow.
I've always called it the extrapolation game. If you can find, you know, there's some tunics here, and there's some tunics here, and there's some tunics here, even if you're not in any of those 3 places, but if they're all around the same time period and they're doing some of the same things, you can extrapolate that that's probably going on other places too. You might not be actually correct, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And, you know, we could just really only do our best.
I've also had fun. I've taught it at FOOL last year, but my one apron dress pattern that I've got that's based off of Hedeby Harbour Find, it's not the same cutting as anybody else has come up with, but to me it makes a lot of sense with where the fragment, how the fragment would be placed on the body and how things go. And so, I mean, that's sort of the opposite end of it, taking just a small scrap. That's obviously, it was something that was worn so many times that it stopped being good for anything except caulking a ship. But this frag still contains some fascinating info, and it was neat to kind of go through looking at it, trying to look at patterns, then having a eureka moment for a way that could be done that's very simple. It still makes a garment. It actually worked.
How is it cut, or if that's too long to explain, do you have like a place where you've written it up?
I've got a handout that I've written up, an article that I wrote up that I can send on to Rylan at the end of this. But basically, it's one piece of fabric that's as wide as you want the apron dress to go. That's folded in half, and you cut one diagonal line. You end up with 3 pieces. You sew them together, and you end up with an apron dress that tapers out, that has a train, that looks like a lot of the runestone illumination type things from Norse finds of women. And so it's really, I mean, it's probably a research thing I'm really proud of, maybe inordinately so, but I hope to do more of that work, finding a piece, finding a fragment or a garment that hasn't been explored too much, or you know, that I don't necessarily like what another archaeologist or reenactor has interpreted it as if it doesn't sit right, because that's the kind of wacky fun we do here.
Yeah. When you're talking about a piece of cloth denigrating to the point that it's used for caulking a ship, I'm reminded of a couple of medieval recorder finds more recently, and they were found in latrines.
Whoops.
Oh my.
Oops.
Well, the Viborg tunic was found in the bottom of a post hole.
What was
Oh,
found
the
at the bottom
Viborg
of the
tunic.
What was found at the bottom of a post hole?
The Viborg tunic?
Oh, wow.
It's the one that you often see with the sort of front flap on it.
The one that
It's
makes no
got like
sense.
a front flap.
Oh,
And kind of a, yeah, the one that makes no sense. Thank you. I didn't want to say it, but you're true.
yeah.
stupid one.
Okay.
Sometimes we do have to ask ourselves, why was it at the bottom of a post hole?
That is a great question.
Yes.
If it was that one that never fit properly, that great Aunt Hilda made you, that you just hate, but you can't throw out,
You know,
it just needed to get disappeared.
does anybody sometimes measure their projects by air miles? How bad they are, how far you want to chuck them?
Yeah. If I can just interject, the Viborg short, I mean, that's the one that's out of, like, I want to say, like, 8 different, like, distinct different textiles. I mean, so it's pretty clearly something that, you know, this was not a high status garment. This was something that was either patched to death or was literally like put together from rags when it was new.
Oh, the Thorsberg tunic, they totally, not the tunic,
Yeah.
the pants and the tunic.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure the Viborg
Yeah, it totally
shirt
looks
is
like it's
made
cut
out of,
together from rags.
yeah, it's like made out of like tons of different textiles.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like this weird embroidery sampler of fabrics and stitches.
More like a quilting sampler, right?
Yeah, it's weird. But there are other things, like there's a tunic from Hedeby that
And I think
that has an arm patch underneath one of the arms. It's like a long strip, and there's someone out there who's made a pattern that includes that strip, and I don't agree with it because that's a patch. It's not something you'd put into something brand new. It's a patch. It's something.
Yeah, but you might want to
after
produce a
torn.
patched garment. I mean,
that's fine, but
if you're
and they totally
reenacting,
did patch
somebody had a
garments.
patch
But remember
on it.
what I said about one grave find? Right?
Yeah.
I always worry about those grave finds that are like completely out in left field. Like they're not like anything else we're seeing for the rest of the extant. And I often worry about them because I often go back to Osa's and his 3-piece suit and his Viking sword.
yeah, one of the things that was drilled into me early in academic studies is that the dead people don't dress themselves. So we have to
That's
keep
true
in
too.
mind, we have to keep in mind the context of whatever kind of burial it is, or if it's a murder that's been found in a bog or whatever. But it's great for archaeologists to be able to tell us how people died if it's someone like a soldier that's in a mass grave or whatnot, because then you at least know that they're wearing something that they put on that morning. But so many grave finds are really entrenched with other cultural meanings that we might just not get, because the dead don't put on their own clothes.
That's something I hadn't really thought about all that much, is if we're wearing a lot of stuff that is based on grave finds. Well, there's all kinds of cultural meanings that we put on what we dress the dead in. So it's entirely possible that we would seriously creep out the people from our own personas. And like, I'm thinking about some more Asian cultures where like you would only put that on a dead person. So we're dressing ourselves as ghosts,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah, we don't necessarily know. I mean, even stuff that looks like it's, you know, stuff that we can identify as definitely high status. We don't know how often, if ever, those clothes were worn before, unless we are able to, you know, unless the archaeologists are able to analyze wear patterns and things. But like Odette was saying earlier, the other thing about grave find is context, and you have to kind of, especially with a lot of the Norse brooch graves, because the bodies decompose, things don't settle where they were, and we have to have our minds looking at things through that lens too, about like, you know, like the brooches don't actually exist halfway inside where the rib cage is. They've just fallen down or settled down. Other things may have shifted place, may have not been preserved. You know, all of those things we have to kind of keep in mind, as you know, in our historian brains, when we're doing something like costuming, and try to meld it.
Still fascinating sources of information for what may have been.
And yeah, like I said, it's not like we have a time machine. Unfortunately.
So how much research
we
goes
did,
on?
and that was kind of the point of my question, right? Like,
okay, who goes?
What was that, Odette?
I want to know how much research is done that never gets published and never is available to us. Like it may get published privately, but not available to us non-officially academics.
Way too much.
Yeah, there's probably a hell of a lot of stuff that's hidden behind the Great Wall of academia.
Absolutely. And some of it's because they don't think there's interest, and some of it's because, you know, they don't have the money. And that's why I think reaching out to people, academics, is important, because they will often give you their information.
Not only that, just even some of the stuff that is done on an amateur way of things, and just not turned in. I saw a piece on Time Team where these people had been doing a lot of detecting on a site, and apparently they've been taking a lot of stuff and selling it before they even contacted Time Team. So some of it is just because they have, you know, treasure seekers or whoever have not thought that it was the right thing to do, or not realized for whatever reason, and they went and did this.
I think also, though, there'd be, since so much of academia operates on publish or perish, there would be a real want on the part of academics, if they had something that they felt was publishable, to publish it.
Well, it's like, you know, anything. If they if it's not marketable, then often it doesn't get published because of what it could cost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even publish it online now. I mean,
Most of the publications actually are in academic journals. You don't have to pay to publish in them, but for the public, they're not so accessible. But I think you might be able to subscribe to something called JSTOR, I put in the chat, which we have as academics, but I think that the public can also subscribe to have access to these journals.
There are getting to be more and more things being published without the paywall. There's also a couple of things like, I mean, there's a Facebook group, request PDFs from people with institutional access, where if you've got a specific article or a topic, people from all over the world who are currently have access to university and college libraries can sometimes try to dig stuff up on your behalf, which is a really cool resource.
Particularly nowadays that you can't fly over yourself.
Somebody had made an interesting point about the fact that there are people who do private sales, and I mean, it's not necessarily helpful for clothing, but certainly for jewelry in earlier periods. I've been finding a couple of things. I've been sort of dabbling with wirework jewelry, and there are the occasional finds of wrist fasteners or rings that I've found on auction house sites. They'll, even once they've made the sale, they keep up the pages, which, while it doesn't give us the archaeological data of context or provenance, whatnot, it gives us, they do give sort of areas and dates, or the dating that they've been able to do best, and it gives a couple of photos of the artifact still. So it's a weird resource, and it's kind of hard to search around, but it's something that it's another thing that you can keep in mind as a place to go.
Yeah, you do have to be. You're completely right, Amber. But we do. It is something that has to be watched, because they often, you're right, do not cite the provenance. They don't cite where they dig, what the date is on it. So yes, you totally have to watch. But yeah, absolutely.
Also, along those same lines, in England, there is, or in the UK rather, there's something called the Portable Antiquities system, where if, where, like, say, if I'm out metal detectoring and I find a, like, half of a Saxon wrist clasp, for example, like, that's not something that the V&A is interested in necessarily, because they have buckets of it. So I, as a private person, might be allowed to keep that, but what amateurs are asked to do is to have the thing, like, photographed with, like, a ruler and stuff, and have it put up in a database. So it's the acronym is PASE, and if you search that, you can find just piles and piles of, like, little stuff, basically, that people have just, kind of found on their own. But you can still, and you can still, like, look at it and find out what information is there.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's super neat, especially since it lets you, get a broader picture than, you know, just the stuff that's going to end up in a museum, you know, because, you know, they don't need, you know, the hundredths or rather like the billionth 12th century straight pin, you know, because they find like literally buckets of those. But if you're interested in 12th century straight pins, well, hey, guess what? You can look at, you know,
12th century straight pins.
Yeah, and there will be like, you know, literally 1,000 12th century straight pins that you can look at, which is cool.
What was that acronym again?
JSTOR?
No, it's PASE. If you search for like Portable Antiquities Database, I think it comes up. I don't have the URL where I can get to it like right now this second.
Portable Antiquities Scheme Database?
Yeah.
Perfect. Finds.org.uk.
Perfect. Yep.
Finds.uk.org.
Finds.org.uk.
Excellent.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ooh,
I felt bad
including the
because
National Museum of Wales.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be gold. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else got? So don't forget, everybody, if you want to send me the links, I've already started. I've got the British Museum one. I've got the JSTOR one. I've got the Portable Antiquities schema.
I haven't gone.
Anything else? Please make sure that you send it to me.
I haven't gone into it. I've been meaning to, but when I was taking the Persona class from a little while back, Google Scholar was also mentioned. I haven't really delved into whether there's much period clothing stuff, but it might be something for people to consider as well.
One place where I get information about patterns and stuff is Pinterest.
Really?
Does anybody else use Pinterest for getting patterns, clothing designs, information? And are there other facilities that you use that might be better than that? Like I say, I'm just a beginner.
Pinterest isn't a bad place to start, but it's also easy. Pinterest is also easy to get bad information off of.
Yeah.
So,
I find it is a good starting place for ideas and getting a feel for things, but then you got to start looking for more accurate data.
Yeah, I find like I might be looking for quotes medieval costume, and it shows me somebody in full Baroque costume because somebody put a tag on it that really should not be there. So like I take Pinterest stuff with a grain of salt, but it still has a lot of photos, patterns, crap like that.
One of the things you can do with Pinterest is take the image itself and plug it into Google image search.
Oh, okay.
And that will probably, some of it will be recursive because it'll bring back up the same pin from Pinterest that you had, but sometimes it will actually, like the same image that the person from Pinterest actually took it from a different website that's actually got information. It's something that I've used with relative success. Sometimes it'll actually take you to the museum, or you know, if it's an illumination, it'll actually take you to
sometimes I find it take you to a reenactment site. So some of the high authenticity
Yeah.
The
Or
reenactment sites sometimes
or
they'll
to an
you get
article
that
that,
that
to an
somebody
article that the actor has done, where in the article they quote what the manuscript is from or whatnot.
I didn't know of Google image search, and there have been some times in Pinterest where I saw something interesting and it led to some absolute garbage site that you know, just had nothing to do with nothing.
Yeah, I'm sure you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, well, with Pinterest, you can just follow the link back to see where they pinned it from, can't you? And then that's probably a better place to start than Pinterest itself.
Some of the things I've pinned, I've tried to sort
What's that,
it.
Matthias?
With Pinterest, you can just sort of click through and get to the site they pinned that image from, and then start there looking at it.
Often you can.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's kind of like,
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Says the librarian. I sometimes forget you do that for a living.
The other thing that you can do is when you're pinning yourself, if the tag, I mean, that's the great thing and the terrible thing about Pinterest is anybody can change the tag on the pin. So they can have ridiculously inaccurate information on the pin, but if you followed it to the actual website or if you've done a Google image search for your own record purposes, is you can repin it with a better tag.
I didn't know that. I've actually been trying to sort things out like Viking and Viking era history with all the stuff from the museums. But I didn't realize you could change the tag for yourself.
Yeah, you can. I mean, that's why some of them are like, oh, I have to remember this. Or like, I love this style. And other ones actually have, will either have like the word source or, you know, it'll say this X manuscript 1500s. It's because anybody can type in a tag and you are allowed to edit it yourself.
Cool.
Emmer, could you also, you may want to include the link for Mark Carlson's website. I believe that was where you were pulling the tunic image from, because that's a really good one as far as getting like, this is what they found kind of line drawings of different styles.
Yeah, the Mark Carlson stuff is really good, and he's really good because he pulls everything together, and so you can kind of make a quick comparison. I think are we supposed to send if we're not putting stuff up into the chat right away, should we send things to you, Odette, or to Ryland?
You can send it to me, guys. I will give you, though you probably have it, my my email address. You can send me direct. I will compile something and then I will send it to Odette. I have been listening in and posting stuff as we talk about it.
Excellent.
I knit, so one of the biggest problems for me is trying to, because what I want to do eventually is I'll probably create pieces that will have patterns, not necessarily different colors, but different patterns, and I want to figure out how to do that. You know, and with a visual impairment, it's kind of hard to get that onto done through knitting. You know what I mean?
Michelle, have you made the acquaintance of Sir Edward?
Yep.
Pardon? Sir Edward. Sir Edward teaches null bending. And he's a very good teacher, nice guy. You might enjoy.
Yeah, his class was last night, but you can.
Yeah, I had something else.
You can always ping him. He's always happy to chat nail binding.
He taught me.
If you're interested in actual just modern knitting, but taking things in, this book, Viking Patterns for Knitting by Elizabeth Lavold, is really cool. She does all kinds of ways of doing interlocked, like sort of what we more often think of as Celtic knotwork, but it's Norse. She's got pattern or charts for how to knit in runes. She's got a thing where she's done little dragon heads, and it's a really interesting approach to using cabling or other textured stitches to pull from runestones and things. I am blanking on the name, but there's also an amazing designer who's got an entire book out of Tudor-based patterns that are all color work, and they're mind-blowingly insane. Just really stunning stuff. So there's two, it's two ends of the spectrum. There's the Tudor and then the Norse, but there are people out there who've got some brilliant books and patterns already, and you can kind of take those as a starting point to designing your own stuff.
Cool. The Tudor one that you're looking for, it's called Knitting with the Modern Maker. It just came out recently, and that's going to be, and it's like up on Amazon, or you can order it directly from the Modern Maker.
That's actually not who I was thinking about, but you're 100% correct that the Modern Maker.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know that there was a different modern colorwork one, because he has some crazy shit in there.
I think I'll have to go and do some checking, because I made it. I haven't thought of my SCA persona in a while, but I think I had chosen 11th century. So I'm kind of working with that, but right now I've just been working with patterns that I've been finding. Like I did a bear cloth washcloth for somebody for the making something for someone challenge that's going on. And I found a neat kind of thing, but I just want to try and find as close to as I can, if you know what I mean.
Well, are you looking specifically for knitting stuff? Are you looking specifically for nail binding stuff?
Knitting.
Because if you're looking for knitting stuff, I think there's a ton of people that knit. Emily, who was here, Baroness Lucia from Ramshaven. So if you're looking to connect with knitting, period knitting, that is totally a doable thing.
Yes. That's more what I knit very easy stuff, like, because I'm not a complicated knitter.
Okay.
I've recently been working on a lot of dishcloths and drawstring bags as well. But other than that, I have no idea where to go.
If you like making drawstring bags, you might want to look into sprang work.
Yes.
Because it makes weird
rather than knitting.
Twisted. Yeah, it's
neat.
It's neat. It hurts my brain a little, but other people get it. So,
yeah.
But you can make lace. You can make mesh bags. You can do snood head covering things. And that's 100% period.
Cool.
I'm sure all of us will agree that part of the problem with the SCA is the number of rabbit holes that it allows you to go down. Oh, but then I found this, but that led to this, which led to that, which led to this other thing, and where was I going to start with?
Yeah. If you're looking for if you're looking for knitting patterns specifically, if you're on Ravelry, you can search for Sally Pointer. And she has a ton of mostly hat patterns. That if you're looking for like something, nice and simple, she has her hat patterns are really good. Most of them are like 15th, 16th century.
Cool.
I have to go soon, but one of the books I picked up was this one on Viking Age costume, and it's 2013, and it's got a whole bunch of links to where their sources are. And it's very simplistic drawings, but they've done research on several different periods and places. So I just use this more for ideas than for actual patterns, but I found that interesting.
Sure, send me the
Thank
link.
you.
They even have shoe patterns, and they go through just.
Definitely send me the link, and I will update it to this communal document we're making.
Okay, great. So I'll put it in here.
All right. Well, we're actually just about getting to the point where I think Matthias is going to this meeting. So does anybody else have anything else that they would like to add, talk about before we log off here?
Tell me more about what makes Kent weird.
I had never even heard about this, so I'm just intrigued for what other people have done with that particular rabbit hole.
What was that one?
I'd never heard of Kent
I
being
totally
weird
lost
in the first
everything
place.
there. Kent being weird in the first place. Yes. Kent is weird.
But why is it weird?
Why is it weird? Because if you look at literally the Cloth and Clothing in Anglo-Saxon England book is like everywhere else in England, they're doing this. Kent is not. Kent is doing this other weird thing, this different thing. Their clothing is like nothing else being seen in England. And that comes out of the dig that Penelope Walton Rogers was involved in. And it had to do with basically they were repairing a railway track or doing a culvert or something like that. And they found a large Saxon cemetery on it. I have, I think, the dig report for that cemetery. It's like you look at it and you're like, okay, that's like nothing I've ever seen. But every single dig in that Kentish cemetery is the same. So it's not like a one-off.
Wow.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's a really cool resource.
So if you are terribly interested in, like I said, in Kent, in Saxon, in early Saxon stuff, it's kind of a must-read. It's a really great book, and I can see if I can dig up that article on the actual dig and see if I can find a link to it, because I know I have a hard copy of it. But if you want it, give me a shout, and or I'll see whether or not I can add it to the list.
I think it would be a good addition to the list.
Yes.
Reminds me, one of my interests is Spain circa 1260. And Nicola just looked at the stuff and said, oh, the Spanish were weird back then.
I had a friend once say, oh, and then there's Spain, where they might as well have robot butlers and flying cars.
I have to go now. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to the host.
Everybody, enjoy your lunch, and we'll see everybody, I'm sure, around. We'll be in the social space later, Edward and I, and like I said, send me those links and I'll get them up, and I'll get Odette to publish that up on as our resources, okay? So thank you, everybody. It was a great chat. We went down lots of lots of fun rabbit holes here.
Yes, thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for hosting it.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Thank you.
All right, say bye, Reno.